Despair, denial, devastation. My 3-day lifestyle. November the 16th, 2001, saw a cascade of my life come down and hit me like a huge tidal wave. I went on a 3-day, I call it a bender, and it wasn't really, it was a psychotic episode that I came out of as I was being tumbled into the back of a police paddy wagon to be carted off to hospital. I'd broken into somebody's home and stolen medication to take an overdose. I'd cut off all my hair. I was wearing clothes I would not normally been seen dead in, and recognised that I'd left my 3 young children, aged 15, 13 and 10, stranded in a suburb with no public transport by themselves. My name's Lorraine, and I want to share with you some of my story today. I was really fortunate in 2001, early 2002, after that particular moment, where I was referred to a psychiatrist who spent time and sat down and looked at me and he said, "What happened? What's happened to you?" That man stood and he listened and he heard, and he helped me to do a hell of a lot of homework around how did I get there? What had happened in my life to get to the age of, I was about 38 at the time, and had had so much contact with mental health services over the years, it was beyond a joke. He learnt, this is bad, isn't it? He learnt that from the age of 2, I'd experienced significant trauma, significant abuse. I had both parents and a grandparent attack me, sexually, physically, emotionally and socially. I wasn't allowed to have friends, certainly wasn't allowed to walk outside the front door and tell anybody at all what was going on behind closed doors. At 16, I had my first psychotic episode, and a social worker at the hospital pulled me aside and told me I was carrying on like a 2-year-old, and that behaviour wasn't okay. What's going on? Eventually, I said, I can't go home. I just can't. They listened to that and organised foster care, which was fabulous. And I stepped into an equally abusive environment. Despair, denial, devastation. So I went and got married, as you do. Had my first child, diagnosed with postnatal depression. Beautiful. Okay, got through that. Had the second child, diagnosed with postnatal depression. Fabulous. Got through that. So, third child comes along, no postnatal depression, but oh my God, did I create hell for my 3 kids and my husband? And so it continued until that day, November 16, 2001. That psychiatrist spent a lot of time with me and he said to me, Lorraine, eventually, I don't think you've ever had postnatal depression. I don't think that you've ever just had a depressive episode. I think there's more going on. What I think you've got going on, Lorraine, is something a little bit more complex than that. Okay, that's fine, says I. Lay it on. He said, the good news is, we know what it is. The bad news is, I don't quite know what we're going to do with it. He said, I'm going to give you not 1 diagnosis here, I'm going to give you 4. Thanks. That particular day, it was early 2002 by then, he gave me a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of abuse that occurred from the time that I was 16 until I was 30. He gave me a diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder. He gave me a diagnosis of bipolar affective disorder, and he gave me a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And so my life began again. For me, growing up, it was like being in a war zone. So I learnt from a very young age, from the age of 2, to be hypervigilant, to be cautious, to be aware, to be alert, to identify a tick in an eye, a colour of a face, a tone of voice. Certainly to never step away from a wall. So when a child grows up in an environment like that for that period of time and continues living into an adult life like that, it becomes very difficult and very challenging to undo that. But my psychiatrist at the time said to me, we think we can do something, but I'm not sure what it is. So when I looked at the title of today, Understanding the Pain of BPD, what does it mean to me? What does understanding that pain mean to me? And I thought I might very quickly look at some of the diagnostic criteria attached to borderline, and certainly some of the words. So let's have a look at this: unstable, emotional, manipulative, self-destructive, a drama queen, major mood swings, and attention-seeking behaviour. That's what I look like. But what I'd like to do today with you is share to me what that feels like and how I do it. And it still continues today to a certain degree. I haven't got a podium. I've got to work with what I've got. Okay. So for me, my life has been about living as an adult but feeling like a child that's still looking for a parent to hold, to love, to say it's okay, and to teach me the skills that I never got. As I've been through this journey, I've been introduced to shame, discrimination, stigma, more often than not from the mental health services that have been supposedly the people that have been trying to help me. It's really interesting for me. The experience has been almost, I've been a screaming siren that's come out in front of me that's gone, warning, nuclear reactor, explosion about to occur. And that's been the experiences as I've stepped into services and workers. They're just this very cautious kind of like, okay, we're just going to tread nicely on eggshells here because we're not really sure what you're going to do. So I was lucky you met all 9 criteria. So I'm going to have a look at this and tell you what it kind of looked like for me. Relationships is the big one. So, intense, unstable personal relationships. And of course, this is fabulous today. I've got 20 minutes, so I can have an incredibly intense relationship with you all and I can walk out at the end of the day and it's fantastic. I'll never see you again. Well, most of you. There are advantages to having a borderline. Okay. So, intense relationships that are vicarious. So, for me, because I don't understand necessarily how to have a quality relationship because I never got taught that, what I do is live my relationship status through somebody that I'll meet. But what I also do in that is build up a barrier, a really big brick wall. And I had somebody say to me only a matter of a few months ago that I appeared like this, and I'll just have to put this down. It was, I like you, come close. I like you. I like you, but come close. And I thought how apt that was about how I deal with my relationships. I want them, I desire them, I really want somebody close. But I actually don't want you close at all because I'm frightened of that. So it was really interesting. On the aeroplane coming over here yesterday, I had a situation where I had 2 very handsome young men either side of me. Thank you very much, Lord. Qantas, somebody did it right. But it was quite incredible because I've become so independent and have learned to do so much myself. What I should, I'll share with you that on that day in 2001, I also lost custody of my 3 children. They were taken away from me. So my marriage had split up years before. So it wasn't only losing self, it was also losing children. So I've been by myself for a while. So I got onto the plane yesterday and I had one of these handsome young men offer to put my suitcase up in the overhead locker. The other one politely took my laptop for me and held that. Then the next one came back and helped me with my seatbelt. And I'm screaming on the inside, just fuck off and leave me alone. But how lovely are these guys? Because they're helping me. Fuck off, leave me alone. Oh, this is really nice, isn't it? I'm liking this. Relationships. That's how they look. Impulsive behaviour, wow. Now I could tell you some stories that have been absolutely amazing. Okay, so impulsivity is fantastic for the experience. Cleaning up the mess afterwards isn't so good. I've woken up in some very interesting beds in some very interesting places with some very interesting people who I never ever want to see again in my life. But that's how it is, because at some times I've wanted something and I've done it. You know, if I've needed drugs to take an overdose, then I've gone and stolen them. If I've needed something or wanted something, then I've stolen it. And normally I wouldn't necessarily dream of doing that. But sometimes this impulsivity of I want it, I've got to have it, and I've got to have it now overrides any common sense approach to that's not okay, Lorraine, and you can't do that. Suicide and self-harm. I haven't got enough fingers and toes, and there's probably not enough fingers and toes in this room to count how many times I've attempted suicide. There's not enough fingers and toes in this room probably to count how many times I've self-harmed. But what does self-harm look like for me? I haven't got a lot of physical scars on the outside. However, I do it in other ways. I abuse alcohol. I abuse sex. I deny myself things, basic things, like food, even though I didn't get much lunch, but that's okay. I deny myself something as simple as basic grooming. So for me, self-harm behaviour is about denying myself things that are things that everyday people should have access to and have the pleasure to enjoy. Attention-seeking behaviour. Hey, I'm standing up here, aren't I? That always helps. The centre of attention, it's really cool. Yeah? It's actually not. For me, and very much like Jonathan was sharing earlier, if I can make a difference in somebody else's life, then that's important to me. Absolutely vitally important. But attention-seeking behaviour to me is not driven by wanting attention per se. It's driven because I have an overwhelming desire to fulfil an empty space, but I don't know what that empty space is. So I go out looking for something. Anger. Wow. Ask my boys about that one. I can be fine 1 minute and I can be in an absolute screaming rage the next. I can get absolutely furious very, very quickly. And I've had so many people say to me, how can you be so angry? How can you lose your temper like that? You know, you were calm a minute ago. Well, actually, I was never calm because I'm always sitting at about 60k an hour. So I don't go from 0 to 100. I go from 60 to 100. So there's a bit of a difference. Sense of self. As you've heard from Jonathan, just understanding who Lorraine is for me is still an ongoing journey. I have great delight in living my life vicariously through anybody else. So, you know, I did learn to become a really good actress, and I think that I could be comfortable having an afternoon tea with the Queen. Thank you very much. I can squat under a gum tree and have a yarn with an Aboriginal elder without a problem at all. I gave a talk a few weeks ago around the criminal justice system and mental illness, and to do that I rode trains, I walked the streets at night by myself, I spoke to people from all different walks of life and felt very comfortable with that, and they told me their stories because I can just change who I am and with who I'm speaking to at any given time. Avoiding abandonment. Oh, God, this is probably the biggest one for me because I never had a sense of attachment to a set of parents to start with. So I'm always looking for a parent and I'm always looking for somebody else to make me feel safe. What I've done is gone out of my way to try and save relationships that may or may not have been healthy for me. I'll go and spend exorbitant amounts of money on buying gifts for people to buy them back so that they'll come back. I go to excessive lengths of text messages and, oh, you've got to love Facebook. All of those kinds of things around what am I going to do to reach out to these people to let them know that I still want to have contact so that they don't turn away from me. Dissociation, for me is quite significant still in my life. I was aware of the fact for the session between morning tea and lunchtime I disassociated in and out during that session. So it's still a big issue. Dissociation for me tends to be the time when I do self-harm, because I just have no sense of what I'm doing or how I'm feeling, because sometimes things just get too overwhelming. So I find for me dissociation comes from when I've been significantly stressed, when I've been triggered. There are certainly triggers. Makes it difficult with the PTSD as well, of course, because they are different triggers, but they result in a reactivity that tends to be the same. So the journey since how am I going for time? Beautiful. Okay. So the journey since 2001 has been quite significant for me. It's been huge. I am still in therapy. And we were talking earlier, I've done CBT, DBT, I've done just about anger management, I've done, what else have I done? Communication skills, I've done, mentalising, we've done EFT, the tapping stuff. Yeah, you name it, I've done it, and I'm still working on it. I still do, I still have a psychology session once every 2 weeks. I still see a psychiatrist once every couple of weeks, depending on how I'm travelling. That sometimes goes to once a week, sometimes it's twice a week. My journey is far from over. It's still got a long way to go. And I don't want to give that, for somebody sitting in the room that might be starting out, no hope, because I can also say at the same time, I made it past 40, and back in 2001, the majority of the literature was saying you'll be lucky to live to the age of 40. I made it. I'm going to be 50 the year after next, and I'm a grandmother of 2. So maybe I'm just bloody stubborn. Maybe I just want to defy the odds. Maybe, just maybe, I want to throw something at you. Maybe people living with personality disorders have something that we've not considered. And I'm not finding a lot of this in the literature. I think that there's a lot of strengths in a person with BPD that we often don't find in the general community, and I think we don't talk about it. So in my journey, I've met a lot of other people with a diagnosis, and I've learnt so much. So these are their strengths that I've seen. Creative and artistic. I have seen some incredible work come from people. And creative as far as being able to put yourself in a situation and relate to people very, very quickly takes creativity. You're adaptable, you know, any environment. Yeah, I can do that. Resourceful. If I need something, I'll find out how to get it, and I'll get it. Intelligent, articulate are the 2 things that I keep getting told I am, and I have seen that reflected in my peers also living with borderline. Incredibly intelligent, incredibly articulate, and Class A personality, as we heard just before lunch. Very observant and alert. For me, growing up in a war zone type environment, I had to be alert and observant, and I still am. People are amazed when I can meet them 3 or 4 years down the track and I can relate back to them what they've told me because I've remembered it. We're attuned to others' emotions very quickly. We can be the first one to pick up somebody in a room that isn't comfortable, that isn't feeling like they're fitting in, that isn't understanding what's going on. Passionate. Oh, wow. That whole emotional turmoil stuff, yeah, we are passionate. Look at a 2-year-old tucking a temper tantrum. That's passion. We're determined. We're incredibly brave and incredibly resilient and incredibly strong. And so, where am I now? Don't even know where I'm up to. Okay. And I think for me, very quickly, what helped for me, the very first thing that helped for me was meeting somebody else that had the same diagnosis. Knowing that I wasn't the only one in this entire world that thought that the rest of the world was screwed up and it wasn't me. So for me, having to come to terms with the fact that maybe, Lorraine, you weren't quite getting it right, maybe the rest of the world's got a different way of looking at things, was a big thing for me. Some intensive day therapy that I underwent. I did a 12-month program, which was 5 days a week, for 12 months, which was what they called multimodality. So it covered off a whole range of different areas, was really helpful for me. Ongoing psychotherapy, medication, very, very small amount, has been helpful for reducing anxiety levels and that kind of stuff, but not a lot more. Relationship with my workers, and again, we're hearing this all the time, the importance of the relationship. Having people setting their boundaries around what they're willing to accept. Yeah, setting boundaries on me doesn't help because I don't understand boundaries. To me, a boundary is a challenge that I want to break through, and I will test those boundaries constantly, the same as a child as they're growing up. Validation of experiences and emotions. Having somebody sometimes describe to me what I was feeling because I didn't understand what it was really important. And so that way I learnt to identify what was angry, what was sad, what was happy. And they were quite foreign experiences to me. The psychiatrist that said, what happened to you, not what's wrong with you, was a turning point, and my willingness to actually make the decision to do something different. And so today, loud, proud, sharing my story, trying to help somebody else, still struggling on a day-to-day, sometimes minute-to-minute basis, on wanting to run screaming out of the room, on wanting to impulsively do something which I know is not good for me, still not developing really good relationships, still alone, still frightened, still terrified. However, I also see hope and inspiration and recovery going on, and I think that that's really, really exciting. So my 3D lifestyle today, or where I'm aiming towards, is going from despair, denial and devastation into desire, determination, and doing it with dignity. And so I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'm going to ask you today to look at someone and speak to them and ask what happened to you, not what's wrong with you, and inspire them to create their own 3D life.